Campus to Canton. Campus to Canton on the Better Sports Network.
Good morning. Good morning. Week 1 of college football is here. This is the Tailgate brought to you by Campus to Canton with a little help from our friends over at Better Sports Network. Different crew here this morning. Austin, Nick, Chris, and Alfred giving us his first appearance on the network. So Alfred, just don't screw this up, and maybe we'll have you back again later this season. Guys, if you have some input on college football today, you need some help with some start sits, just have an opinion about something we're talking about, drop it in the chat. Let us know. We'll get to all your questions here as we go on. Gentlemen, we've actually already had some football played today, or the past couple of days. So I do want to talk about that real quick before we preview today's slate. And I think we have to start with Florida-Utah, one of the bigger games on the slate this weekend. Alfred got the sad face on there. He's a Gator alum. Not a great showing for Florida. No. Came out kind of flat there, really not sharp at all. Nick, I want to come over to you. I mean, I think we expected Florida to be not great this year. Was this kind of what we should have expected? Like, should the reaction just be, that's what was going to happen here?
Honestly, I'm a little mixed. I lean pretty heavily on my projections, CFP Winning Edge team strength projections, and Florida is higher in our rankings than a lot of outlets out there. A talented team, obviously. I know that there's plenty of discussion on whether or not Graham Mertz was the right choice at quarterback. The stat line actually didn't look bad, but I think all of us watching would agree that it was not necessarily the smoothest first start for him. So I think that this Florida team still has potential. I think that Utah, it's a tough place to play in week 1, even with the injuries that they were dealing with. Still a tough opponent. So I'm not overly panicking yet. I do think Florida's going to be competitive week in and week out, but it was definitely a winnable game and a missed opportunity.
Alfred, Florida went up there to that little stadium and lost. I didn't want you to lead it off because you're too close to this thing. But now that we've gotten a reasonable take out there, I just want to hear like the filtered college football fan calling into a radio show's version of how we should be reacting to this.
Yeah. Nick said it pretty well from a conservative analysis take. I think Florida's talent is not up to the Urban Meyer era, the Swamp Kings era, but it's not that bad. And according to his rankings, the talent level and some of the power rankings, they should have probably been more competitive. The thing that killed me was we're playing like JV football out there. I mean, there was the one penalty. Okay, so we stop them on 3rd down. It's 4th and 3. They punt the ball. We had 2 guys with the same number on the field. I'm not sure I've ever even heard of this happening, and it's a 5-yard penalty. So 4th and 3 becomes 1st down. They score on that drive. It's 14-3. We also had multiple, false starts, a 4th and 1 inside the 10, going to try to score, false start. Then we decide to kick the field goal, miss the field goal. I mean, tons of just little things, playing dumb football, which, a guy like Billy Napier, he's not very boisterous. He's not a big energy guy. He's supposed to be super detail-oriented, have a plan, meticulous. And we looked like Willie Taggart's FSU teams. Just disaster stuff from a football angle. The talent's whatever, and Graham Mertz was not the problem. I know myself and a lot of my, fan friends going into the season was like, I cannot believe our answer was Graham Mertz, but he was fine. Like, Graham Mertz not the problem. The passing game wasn't the problem, which is what most people thought. The choices of not running the ball was weird. And then some 3rd down play calls were just like really bad. Throwing short crossers in front of the sticks to covered guys behind the line, 4th and 7, throwing it behind the line. Just like ridiculous choices in that way. So I was more mad about just like the footballness of it, and not really like, oh, we look like a better team beat us. I think an okay team beat a bad team in Florida right now.
Chris, anything to add there as you're doing your best Jimmy Buffett impression here this morning?
God, I can't even believe I'm on the show. I think I'm in the denial portion of my grief. I'm really upset about Jimmy Buffett passing, but I'm powering through today for the fans and the listeners. I thought Graham Mertz looked terrible. I mean, the stat line was fine, but I was not impressed. He looked like Graham Mertz from Wisconsin. Graham Mertz from Wisconsin was not a good quarterback. We'll always have the week one game against, who was that, Illinois in 2020 COVID season, where he looked awesome, and Felix isn't here, but comped him to a Hall of Fame quarterback at the time, Peyton Manning. I'm worried about this Florida team. It should have been a lot closer than it was. I mean, it was not good. They were outcoached. Kenny Dillon was a really good coach, though. So I don't want to say but the difference is massive. I projected Florida not to go bowling this year. I still feel really good about that projection. They're a 5-win team. And
I think 4-8, 5-7 is likely. Not even could happen. I think that's more likely than not.
I mean, that can't cut it as an SEC school in the hotbed recruiting state of Florida. That can't happen.
Yeah, that's the problem. It's not going to get any easier in conference, right? I mean, you got guys talking about Utah, such a hard place to play. I mean, where else are they playing this year? They've got games against some of the best teams in the SEC. It's not getting easier once you.
Well, and the tricky thing is, and I'll end it on this, but thinking from a program perspective, the tricky thing is, you fire Napier and he's been bad, but we do have a top 3, top 4 recruiting class for 2024 right now. But you fire Napier, you fire that staff and lose that class. I mean, I guess at some point you're just scrap it. Who cares? But we have one of the best classes coming in since the Urban era if they all stick. But if that class starts losing to attrition, there's no reason to keep Napier. I mean, it's just been a disaster from day one. The Rashada thing, the wins and losses. So it's a mess.
Yeah. And if it doesn't go well, they might lose those kids anyway. If you're listening right now, tell us who you're rooting for today. Tell us where you're listening in from. I've already seen somebody saying go Utes. So somebody's happy at your,
I see this comment.
Their loss is your loss is their game.
This guy, Nathan Ruffalo, says, as both a Badgers and a Gators fan, so that exists in the world, FYI. I couldn't have been more disappointed in the Mertz transfer.
That's tough. I'm sorry. We're sorry, Nathan. We're thinking of you this morning here as we power through this show. The other game that I actually want to talk about here real quick, guys, before we get into our weekly rankings, what we have over at Campus2Canton.com from a fantasy perspective, is actually the Stanford-Hawaii game last night, which just sounds like a bad start to a joke. But it was an exciting game. I watched the first quarter and a half or so, and then I just ended up going to bed because it was on late. I know, shame on me. I'm old. But this was a fun game. 2 high-powered offenses. Stanford ends up getting the win there. I think a few interesting surprises in this one. And Chris, I want to come to you here on this first one. Stanford started quarterback Ashton Daniels last night. We didn't see this coming at all, right?
I didn't. I mean, Justin Lamson transferred in from Syracuse. I thought that he was going to be the best quarterback. They also had Ari Patu on that roster. I did not think that this was going to happen. They kept it under wraps, really well. Shout out to Troy Taylor and that staff for that and the game plan, because I thought he played pretty admirably. And, Hawaii took it to Vandy week 1. I mean, they were really competitive with an SEC school, and their play on the lines was really good, strong on the defensive line, strong on the offensive line, didn't really get a lot of movement against Vandy. And I thought Stanford really just outplayed them pretty good. So, yeah, I think you have to be excited about this quarterback and what Stanford can possibly do this year, because, I mean, Troy Taylor led a really electric Sacramento State offense last year. Now he's the first-time head coach at Stanford. I think it could be a pretty interesting situation if Daniels is kind of legit. And, I mean, that was his first game playing, and he looked pretty good.
Nick, I mean, Chris just kind of touched on it there. Troy Taylor coming in here, had a really, really strong offense, but you never really know going from FCS to FBS, especially in the first year, what it's going to look like. I mean, Hawaii's whatever. They're going to face some much more difficult opposition, but what should we expect them to be pretty decent offensively this year, you think?
I do. I think so. I had a hunch that we'd see a much improved Stanford team. I mean, they're much more talented than they played like the last couple of years, especially. But looking through Troy Taylor's history, the last couple of seasons specifically, it ran a 2-quarterback system, Jake Dunlaway and Asher O'Hara. So that was maybe a little bit of a concern once Ashton Daniels also surprised me getting the start. Everything I had heard was that Justin Lamson.
That's hard to do. To surprise Nick with anything on that.
Well, I mean, we talked about it a few times on C2-A-Days, that the reports we heard coming out of camp, Lamson was, first in drills, but that can be misleading, obviously, sometimes. So, so when Daniels got the nod, then I thought to myself, okay, is he the full-time starter? Are they going to rotate a little bit? Because that has been Taylor's history the last couple of years, but Daniels played every significant snap. I think Lamson got on for the kneel down at the end of the game, but that's important because, going through our stat projections where we list the last 3 years for the current team, the head coach and the offensive coordinator, the numbers from Troy Taylor's Sac State offense are pretty impressive. I mean, had one quarterback throw for 2,500 yards in a part-time role, or, a most of the time role. And then Asher O'Hara ran for, the quarterbacks combined almost 1,000 yards last year, 19 touchdowns. So the history indicates that there's an opportunity for this to be a really, really productive offense. The question was whether or not this team was talented enough to, carry that over to the field or to the, FBS and Power 5 level. But I think they can, even though the Stanford team is really, really young. They are more talented, like I said, than they showed the last couple of years. And I think we got a glimpse of that last night. And they've added a little bit of depth as well. So one final thing that I think is a great sign is Troy Taylor did not use the tight end position much at all in the passing game at Sac State, but he already has proven something that worries CFF folks a lot, is whether or not a coach is smart enough or capable of utilizing one of their best players. And Benjamin Urasek, 9 catches, 138 yards and a touchdown. I mean, that's more production than Troy Taylor tight ends had the last 2 years combined. So that's a great sign also.
Yeah, well, that's a great sign. And I was actually just going to kind of follow up and ask you about that. So it sounds like wheels up on Urasek, who, I totally didn't bench for Thomas Yasmin in a couple spots this week. Definitely didn't do that. We're starting off real great this year. Alfred, are you going to be putting in any waiver claims for Ashton Daniels this week, if that's kind of what this offense is capable of? Not to blow up Nick's spot, but he told me before the show that he's already put a couple claims in. So if you're in a league with Nick, I'd go check. But
yeah, I think that, anytime you get this brand new information on a guy who's probably on waivers everywhere, I'm a big fan of using this waiver budget early in the season, because you get the most games out of those guys. And these are the times, whether it's NFL or college side, this is when the depth chart is truly revealed and you see what's going on. And like Nick said, this coach has a history of running his QBs. Wasn't O'Hara at Middle Tennessee State? I remember playing him for the Blue Raiders in DFS a few years ago. Then he went to Sac State. And I kind of lost track of him. But it sounds like, if they're going to be running, I think if I remember, Daniels is a fairly athletic guy as a prospect. I remember looking at him. So, yeah, I think why not? And then another guy which came out of nowhere was the Western Michigan running back, who I know we were tweeting about. I saw a complete no-name, but had 30 carries. That's the kind of stuff you jump on right away. So, yes, waiver pickups for sure. And then the one other thing is, over on the official, when we do our recruiting show every week, one of the surprise teams that we ended up kind of liking quite a few of their recruits this year was Stanford in that 2023 class. Miles Jackson was an interesting QB. Caleb Hampton was a running back I think we all got on board with towards the end of the cycle. Austin, I think you liked him quite a bit as well. And so if this is going to be an interesting offense now with Taylor at the helm, that class looks even more interesting as they kind of get on the field and start producing. So, and I know that I didn't love him because he's like 22 years old already, but Tiger Bachmeier, I know he got on the field this week.
He caught the first pass, freshman. I'm pretty sure, of the game.
Yeah. So he's going to be playing. He's very old for his class, but I mean, that doesn't mean he can't produce, at least in college. That's really more of an NFL projection thing. So, he's going to be a guy right away in this offense. No one's going to beat out Jurasek this year, but he's already starting Bachmeier and people liked him too. So 3 interesting skill position players for that Stanford offense that probably weren't even drafted in most freshman drafts.
Tiger Bachmeier, best hair in college football. Let us know in the chat. If you haven't seen it, he's got a mane. He's got a mane on him. All right. Let's talk about some of our rankings for today and tomorrow's games. We've got games all weekend here. We even have a Monday game because there's no NFL this week, which is great. We do weekly projections over at Campus2Canton. And let's hop into some QBs here. I know we've got some lovely graphics that producer Will is going to be bringing up for us. And here you go. We got Caleb Williams at 1. I mean, I think Caleb Williams is probably going to be projected as top 3 or so quarterback basically every week this season, if I had to guess. Some other very familiar names here at the top: Dylan Gabriel at Oklahoma, Austin Reed at Western Kentucky. That's an offense that we love. Frank Harris, UTSA, Michael Pratt, Tulane, Michael Penix Jr. at 6 from Washington. Carter Bradley, that's an interesting one, and we can talk about him here in just a second. Blake Shapen at Baylor. EJ Warner, Kurt Warner's son, the QB at Temple. Byron Brown at USF. That's an interesting one. I'm not sure if he's starting or not. That might be one where you just sub the backup's name in for him. Connor Wegman at Texas A&M. Jaden Daniels at LSU. John Reese Plumlee, who we already saw play, and he did, in fact, have a great game. And then J.J. McCarthy, QB at Michigan. Chris, I mean, let's not talk Caleb Williams. That one's kind of obvious, but I don't know. I mean, Carter Bradley, that's an interesting name to have in here. I'm a little surprised we have him this high.
Yeah, so I think that's a potential upset spot for South Alabama. They're heading to Tulane this week. Tulane secondary was really good last year. I think they lost a lot of production, though, and I don't think the defense is as good as advertised. They're ranked 24th team in the country. I have them closer to 40. 45. I don't think they're nearly as good as they were last year in that big win against USC. So I think Carter Bradley and the Jaguars can do some damage this week. They're 7, or is it at 6 now? Can I find? No, they're 6-point dogs. So, the market thinks, yeah, but I mean, I like South Alabama. South Alabama is a really feisty team, and they return a ton of production on both sides of the ball. So I like Carter Bradley. I like his 2 receivers. It's a really good offense, and the running back LaDamian Webb. It doesn't surprise me that he's this high. I think he's pretty underrated. Total's kind of low in this game, but kind of interested in the Jags.
Nick, any guys in our top group that your rankings do not seem to agree with?
So I was just scrolling through, and my projections are a little lower on Dylan Gabriel, which surprises me just a little bit. I'm a Gabriel fan. Drafted him in best ball quite a few times. And Arkansas State, not the best defense, certainly. So it seems like a pretty good matchup. But the way the numbers shake out, Gabriel's behind guys like Carson Beck and Jalen Milroe, who's going to be starting at Alabama. Cade Klubnik, I mean, there's definitely lots of talent to work with there at Oklahoma, and I do like Gabriel, but I was a little surprised. I'm lower. I'm 28th this week on Dylan Gabriel, which lower than expected.
Alfred, any names stand out to you there on that list, or any that you think should be in our top 14, 15 there that did not make it?
That didn't make it. For one, I know it's East Carolina. I feel like there's probably a better pick than J.J. McCarthy. I mean, just for example, Chandler Morris at TCU. I'd rather play him over J.J. McCarthy. I think McCarthy's gonna hand off a ton, maybe throw 2 touchdowns, but they're not gonna put the pedal to the metal. I mean, Nick, I'm glad Nick's on this show. One of the things that kind of shocked me going through his projection season long, not just weekly, but season long. I really like all his projections for TCU. I think they were very surprising. The running back, John Paul Richardson, going for nearly 1,000 yards on the projection. Chandler Morris running the ball for like 400 and something, 500 yards, which I didn't really expect, but that's what he's got in there. So I'd say, yeah, flip it, at least at the bottom of this thing, flip out J.J. McCarthy, give me Chandler Morris against Colorado.
What about Tyler Shuck today? That's one that I want to toss out. Our projections have him 29th overall at the position. They take on Wyoming. I know Wyoming traditionally can be a tricky team to play. They tend to kind of slow the game down, play pretty good team defense, even if the talent isn't necessarily amazing. But this is a Texas Tech offense that I think we expect to really make some big steps here. Zach Kittley, their offensive coordinator, his second year there, I think he's kind of got the pieces in place that he wants. I don't know, Chris, Nick, am I crazy here? I really like him this week, and if he stays healthy, I kind of like him all season.
They're at Wyoming, right?
Yeah, Laramie's tough.
I mean, I was looking at the weather forecast this morning, and
they getting snow already? September 2nd?
No, but the wind. So the wind there is the problem.
Okay.
Generally speaking, it doesn't look like it's gonna be a problem today, though. So I mean, I think you can feel better about this Texas Tech offense than maybe you do. Generally speaking, I think we're maxing out at like 11, and the number that I look for when it comes to wind is like 15 plus. So. I feel good about projecting this Tech offense. Total in this game is low. I think they're essentially telling us, hey, we think Craig Bohl, the head coach of Wyoming, can maintain this offense some. I don't know if I buy that. I don't know. I'm pretty low on Wyoming this year. I was low on them last year too.
I'm only in on Wyoming in Laramie. They are a brutal team to play in Laramie. But otherwise, this thing.
I'm pretty high on Tyler Shuck. I mean, he's one of my personal favorites. Projections have him top 10 this week. I worry just a little bit about Wyoming because Craig Bohl is one of a handful of coaches who really, their programs can manipulate the clock offensively, play, keep away, and limit opponent possessions. And, with the rule change, we're seeing some evidence already that you can shorten a game if you are so inclined. And Wyoming is one of those teams that I definitely would expect to try to do that. They're, of course, really thin at the running back position, starting a JUCO transfer. A couple of their top expected running backs are going to be out this week. So, they're at a talent disadvantage. There's a little bit of a concern if you're on Wyoming that maybe they just won't be able to extend drives, won't be able to move the chains. But if they do, I mean, we might see some real keep away from Tyler Shuck, and that makes me just a tiny bit nervous. But when he's on the field and, Texas Tech is going, I think that they're going to be able to be very productive. Wyoming, as good as they traditionally are on defense, I just think the talent disadvantage is big enough that this week Texas Tech is going to be able to, Shuck's going to have a good day. It's just how he'll have an efficient day, I think, but how often will he actually have the football?
All right, guys. What do you think about our quarterback rankings this week? There is a call-in link in the YouTube description if you guys want to call in and let us know. If not, feel free to drop it in the chat as well. Let's look at the running backs this week, guys. We got the running back rankings here. There are a handful of players that did not make it into the rankings based on how our rankings are calculated with different point spreads and things like that. If a spread's not released, the player doesn't go in. We are working on that at the moment. But here are our running back rankings for the week. Some interesting names on here as well. Nakia Watson, the running back up at Washington State, is our top ranked running back. Jarquez Hunter, that's a tricky one. He might not play a whole game due to some disciplinary issues. So he's a guy to watch at Auburn. Jace McClellan at Alabama. Will Shipley at Clemson. Nick Singleton at Penn State at 5. Elijah Green at 6. Jabari Small, Tennessee running back at 7. That could be interesting, especially with their center out, which we're going to talk about here in a little bit. Jonathan Brooks, Texas running back at 8. Damian Martinez, Oregon State at 9. RJ Harvey, who already played and had a big game for UCF at 10. Jaden Ott, the Cal running back at 11. Donovan Edwards, the Michigan, one of the Michigan duo there at 12. Marquise Crosby, and then Kavorian Barnes at 14 from UTSA. I think the running back rankings here are interesting. And I think just with how our running back rankings pool data, there's a lot of top running backs playing some FCS teams and stuff this week. So probably not quite perfect. Chris, I don't know, initial impressions on some of these guys. Nakia Watson first. I do think he'll have a nice game.
Yeah, I mean, he had a big start or big end to last season for Washington State. It's they're favored in that matchup against Colorado State, but I mean, when that total or that spread came out in like June 18th or whatever, I think when Circa is released them, it dropped. Like it might get to single digits at this point. So it's gonna be a competitive game. He's used in both phases of the game. He's a good player. I think he's gonna be involved. I think this offense is gonna be better. I actually think they're upgrading offensive coordinators despite the offensive coordinator taking the New York, Texas job. So that kind of tells you how I feel about Ben Arbuckle hire at Washington State and how I think Eric Morris held that offense back a little bit. But yeah, I like Nakia Watson. He's kind of under the radar. Like I feel like nobody really talks about him, and he can do some damage, generally speaking.
Luke in the chat asked McCray versus Wyoming or Hilaire versus Liberty. Yeah. I would like Dre McCray. I'm starting him in a bunch of places, quite frankly. I'm not on the Odu Hilaire train, which is who I'm assuming that is for Bowling Green.
So. I am. I'm driving it.
I know you are.
Him as a day 2 pick in the NFL, don't you?
I think he's really athletic. He from Alabama A&M, and now he's at Bowling Green. I'm a fan of his. I would play him against Liberty. I don't know what to expect from Liberty with the new staff and everything. And so I mean, I would play Hilaire. I just don't know what to expect from this wide receiver rotation at Texas Tech quite yet. That's my concern.
For sure. Someone asked, tell me why Jaden Ott is at 11. I mean, I think there's really nothing else in that backfield, and they're not playing a particularly difficult opponent this week would be my guess, quite frankly. And Ott did some damage against very poor competition last year.
The only time he did damage.
Pretty much. Let's touch on the wide receivers here, guys. Bring those up on the screen here. Number 1, I don't think is that surprising, and number 2, quite frankly, and even I think those top 6, I feel awesome about all of those. Marvin Harrison and Mecca Ibuka over at OSU. We think this game's going to get a little out of control against Indiana, so that could cap some ceiling potentially there. But to get the game out of control, somebody's got to score. Could very well be those guys. Malachi Corley, the Western Kentucky leader, at 3. Rome Odunze from Washington and his teammate Jalen McMillan at 5 against Boise. That's going to be an interesting one there. Jordan Curley, SMU, we project him to be their top receiver this year at 6. Kobe Hudson played already, had a decent game for UCF this week. 8 is Barry and Brown at Kentucky. I think that's an interesting one. See if he can kind of break out this year. Matthew Golden, we expect him to be Houston's top guy at 9. Antoine Wells was thought to be a little iffy all week or for the past couple weeks, but sounds like he is going to play. Malik Neighbors at LSU. He gets a tough matchup this week against Florida State. Jeremiah Hunter, we have him top 12 there. Obviously, again, Cal, weak opposition. Taj Washington from USC at 13. And then Jalen Calhoun from Duke. I think that's an interesting one as well at 14 there. Nick, I don't know. I mean, I think the top handful there I feel really good about. Any other names stand out to you here on this list?
Yeah, so the projections I do are a little bit different than these for the running back position. At wide receiver, they line up pretty well. The major difference I noticed was that Matthew Golden actually is the top of the list for my projections this week, which a little bit of a surprise given all the star power that's up there, as you mentioned. And Jeremiah Hunter is actually way down the list. So everyone else lines up pretty well, but the projections that I do, which have a different sort of a a different philosophy, I guess, in what we weight. And the ones I do are based mostly on, coaching history and usage patterns and things like that. So Golden stepping into a really, really great situation there. Hunter, my numbers are much more skeptical.
Fair enough. And somebody did ask about Jeremiah Hunter, so I think that probably answers his question there in the comments. Alfred, I don't know. I mean, any wide receivers that you really like this week that maybe either aren't on this list or vice versa, a guy on this list that you don't love this week?
I have a question about, and Nick can speak to this a little bit, I guess, on projections, as he is deep in that stuff, and Mox too. Why would, of all the USC receivers, why would Washington be the guy? I don't remember him being necessarily the target leader last week. It seems like that's going to be almost like a Kansas City offense type thing where you've got the stud quarterback and he just does whatever he wants and distributes to whoever's open, not locking in on one guy. Seems a little weird. I know they're playing a soft opponent, but I would take, for instance, DraftKings wise, I would take the cheapest of the USCs if you wanted to, pair with Caleb Williams. And then I wouldn't feel awesome about starting many of them on a weekly CFF lineup. And if you have Taj Washington, you didn't draft him to be some stud, so you probably have a better option. I think they all get 5 to 6 receptions, and then you're banking on getting lucky on touchdowns. So I was curious why he wound up on there myself.
It's probably, and I know the rankings that are on the website take into account the recent performance. I think of the last 3 weeks give the most weight. And Washington did have the 76-yard touchdown last week, so that probably factors in a little bit. Led the team in receiving yards, only had 2 catches, but
that's the thing. Yeah,
so that might have been what pushed him up. But I definitely agree that USC is going to spread it around quite a bit, and I think there's a good chance that we see, 1 week Washington has the big, the big day, or is the beneficiary of the 76-yard touchdown. Maybe next week it's Singer. Maybe the next week it's Williams. Maybe the next week it's Rice. So I do agree with you for sure on there. But I think probably from a rankings perspective, it might be last week and the one big catch he had, but being the leading receiver potentially.
Yeah. My mind is only on volume with these guys. So a guy who had 2 for 75 and a touch, and one of them was a 75-yard touchdown. I don't really even care about that almost. So, okay, interesting. So I thought he was a little out of place there. I'd go for more of a volume guy, but otherwise looks good to me. Ohio State is just going to be at the top every week, I guess.
Let's touch on the tight ends real quick here, and then we're going to head to break. I think we probably already saw the best tight end performance of the week, if I had to guess. And Benjamin Uraseki's down there at 12, but I think fair based on what we kind of expected out of Stanford. So that I'm sure he's going to be significantly higher moving forward here. Some good names in the top here: David Martin Robinson at Temple, Isaac Rex, I think is an interesting one there for BYU, Theo Johnson at Penn State, Oscar Cardenas at UTSA, Luke Lachey at Iowa, number 5, Jack Velling, number 6. Colston Loveland, 7. Malik Carr, 8. Was probably a little high for him, but Michigan State looked, I think, even worse than we expected them to last night overall. Jason Littlejohn at 9. Jordan Smith at 10. Nikki Dowmelin at 11. Riley Smith at 13. RJ Maryland at 14. I mean, I expect Maryland to have a pretty good day. I'd have him higher. And I do think Lachey is probably saved by the news that Cade McNamara probably plays today. Is that a fair assumption, guys? Chris?
I am honestly pretty surprised that he's going to play because it sounded like all week Cade McNamara was going to be out. I like Lachey. His prop line was at 30.5 all week and shot up to 36 this morning. So I think that's a good sign for Lachey truthers and backers. And, he is, for those who are curious, he is the cousin, I believe, of Nick Lachey.
That's fair enough. All right, we're going to go to break, guys. When we come back, we're going to have our draft guy, Barnabas, here talking about some of the big matchups across the slate today. Then, of course, we're going to get into some start sits, prize picks, and a ton more. Hang tight. We'll be back after the commercial here.
It's college football game day, and we're getting you ready for all the action on Campus to Canton.
feel like this is a quietly contentious point in dynasty fantasy football, what it means to actually be rebuilding. Some people say you should never truly be rebuilding. How do you view the rebuilding versus competing dichotomy in dynasty?
So I will be the first person to acknowledge that my preferred format of fantasy football is just redraft. The years that I have played dynasty, it has been I've drafted a win now team because I've seen people that have just gotten into the cycle of rebuilding and thus they just don't make any progress. So if you're rebuilding for the 5th year in a row, I just, I don't know exactly how you get out of it, but yeah, it's definitely something that can happen. And a lot of people, especially when we come out of the NFL draft, everyone's just instantly shipping off, draft picks and everything. So, I mean, it's definitely something that can happen.
Joey, do you feel similarly to it? Do you feel like you see people getting stuck in the rebuilding loop?
I mean, I would say people that try to rebuild in the beginning of seasons, of their fantasy seasons, I see them get stuck in that rut. I would really try to only ever rebuild if I knew I was going to miss the playoffs. Like, I'm always trying to play to win, even if it's maybe I don't know.
I think my big thing is the word rebuild is a much shorter time frame than I think most people say it should be. Like, they look at rebuild as like 3 years out competing. Rebuild, you're looking to compete next season. You know what I mean? Like, if you're doing it now, you're looking to revamp, and maybe there's a one season where you ship it off, but that very next season you should be competing. If you're doing it like that, I'm cool with it, but you got to have a plan, not just keep getting the young players, keep getting the draft picks. Otherwise, you end up like Tim. Maybe not like Tim who gets a bye, but you make the playoffs, you're in that like 4 to 6 range every year, just hovering in the middle. Nothing ever gets better, nothing ever gets worse.
I think I play like you in Dynasty, Simon. I play in 3-year windows.
100%. That's my go-to. And with the rate at which Dynasty leagues turn over, you should really only ever play in a 3-year window.
Right, we are back. The Tailgate here, brought to you by Campus2Canton. Austin, Nick, Alfred, and Chris joining you here this morning. We're going to bring in our draft guy Barnabas here in just a second. But before we do, guys, go check out the Fantasy Alarm All-Pro subscription, plus their fantasy football draft guide and cheat sheet. Start a 7-day free trial of that All-Pro subscription and get the fantasy football draft guide and cheat sheet for free. The season starts in 5 days, guys. This is a big draft weekend. Go ahead. Do that now. Go to fantasyalarm.com/draft to get started there. All right. Barnabas. Barnabas is our lead draft guy over at Campus2Canton. Love talking to him because he brings up just a ton of names that I've never heard of. Barnabas, thank you for coordinating with me this morning. Nobody else got the memo. Glasses, Campus2Canton shirt. I don't know.
Coffee.
And a coffee cup. This was not hard, guys. No one else did. So, Barnabas, you've got 3 really nice matchups for us here today. Some draft-eligible guys kind of duking it out. Go ahead, just kick us off with one of these matchups that we should be looking for today.
Yeah, so if anyone read my weekly article this week, I was talking about Brant Kuithe versus RJ Moten, and Kuithe was obviously hurt, and RJ Moten had 1 tackle, so that's how that goes sometimes. But a privilege at the beginning of the season is we get all these interconference matchups. And I have one for you from the Sun Belt versus the AAC, right? We are so starved for quarterback prospects early in the cycle that we will name anyone quarterback 3, quarterback 4. And one of those guys is Tulane quarterback Michael Pratt, right? He can make almost all the throws. He doesn't have the best arm strength. He has acceptable mobility. He had a few rushing touchdowns last year. But there are high expectations going to the season. And on the other side of that, we have safety for South Alabama, Yam Banks, who's also a draftable guy.
Wait. Did you say his name is Yam?
Yam Banks. That is
Okay. Just wanted to make sure I
he's
caught that
officially
correct.
listed on the roster. I don't actually know what his legal name is.
It's probably short for Yamathy. I get it.
Yeah. Yam Banks mostly plays in the slot right now for South Alabama. Probably projects better as a box safety in the NFL. He's like a pretty built frame, and he matches up with the slot guys or tight ends. He has a little bit of a problem with collapsing his knees in coverage, especially when it's a slower release.
Why is that bad, Barnabas?
So if your knees collapse in while you're trying to read the receiver, it's really hard to cut out of it in terms of like lateral cutting. And so your only choice is to basically reset your legs before you take off in a single direction. So if he can kind of, stutter his legs a little bit more, chop it instead of just collapsing the knees, then he's probably has a little bit of better chances keeping up with speedy guys, such as, Michael Pratt's favorite target, Jaquan Jackson, right? Moving on, talking about starved for quarterback prospects. We have the Carolina versus Carolina matchup going on today. UNC versus USC. Debatable, hot topic apparently, calling it USC. But Drake May.
Be careful.
Yeah, we got to be careful. Yeah, Mox is active on the Twitter today, making sure people know about South Carolina. Drake May. We're coming into the season. We're assuming he's quarterback 2. Behind Caleb Williams. Some people on the socials are saying that they've heard from people saying Drake May is better than Caleb Williams. Debatable, but it's a clear top 2, and then we're looking for quarterback 3 after that. So can Spencer Rattler maybe claw his way up there? When he was coming out of high school, 24/7 described him as a transcendent quarterback. That was in his scouting blurb. So can he reclaim that scouting pedigree and establish himself as maybe not 3rd, but maybe the 5th quarterback in this class on a relatively precarious and maybe described as plucky South Carolina team? So yeah, we'll see. And it has to start with UNC, whose defense is probably not as good as you would expect from a Power 5 team that's expected to be, comes into the season ranked in the top 25. And then finally, the game we're all waiting for is tomorrow, actually, right? LSU versus Florida State. We all know what Trey Benson can do in that Mike Norvell inside trap scheme. He has good vision, good patience, and it's just kind of a perfect fit. And we all saw that last year. So we'll talk about Trey Benson probably again at some point during the season. But let's talk about a couple of these LSU guys. We all know Mason Smith is out for this game. LSU tried to schedule a game in front in week 0 so that they could get Mason Smith back for this game. Didn't work out. But let's talk, like, LSU in general is one of those schools that really values jersey numbers, right? We know what coaches think of players based on what jersey number they're wearing. So I'm going to talk about their number 1 and their number 18 this coming to the season, right? Number 1 has been worn by the likes of Eli Ricks, Bossman Fat, Christian Fulton, Dante Jackson, Eric Reed. So pretty good defensive back pedigree. Number 1 this year goes to Omar Spates, Oregon State linebacker transfer. And without Mason Smith in front of him, can he, take on blockers correctly? And can he stop Trey Benson? And at defense tackle, we have Mekhi Wingo wearing number 18, also worn by the likes of BJ Ojulari, Damone Clark, Kaylavon Chason, Tre'Davious White, right? Once again, big defensive contributors. Wingo is kind of like one of those 3-tech penetrators. He's not really a block taker, but he can take on 2 blocks. He's just going to be washed out of the play with 2 blockers. And so between the 2 of them, can they shut down this inside trap game of Mike Norvell? And yeah, it'll be interesting to see. That's obviously the marquee game for this week for a reason. So we'll see how that plays out.
All right, fair enough. So that is who we're looking out for this week. If you are a draft guy, Barnabas, thanks for hopping on here this morning. Thank you again for coordinating. You're the only guy that did that here with me. Good luck to your Terps today.
Yeah, against Coach Loxley's alma mater, the Towson Tigers.
There we go. All right, thanks, Barnabas.
Yep.
All right, bringing the crew back on here. Guys, let's talk some start sits here today. And we're getting some more questions in the chat. If you've got more, let's get them in the chat. I do want to start off real quick. Tracer asks, is there any UNC wide receiver to start with Des Walker still ineligible, and that whole situation still sadly going on. Any guys, Nick, that you feel comfortable playing this week with them?
So I've been going back and forth a little bit. I think I like Kobe Paysour the most. It sounds like JJ Jones, and Gavin Blackwell are in line to start, but I would expect that Nate McCollum is going to be in the mix as well. I don't honestly have a great read on who's going to step in and be that go-to guy that we expected Des Walker to be. But if I had to pick one, I'd probably lean toward Paysour.
Awesome, fair enough. That's a good answer. While I have you, do you want to tell me who you're starting today? Who any guys that you like, maybe even a little more than projections would suggest, or something like that?
So I went with my toughest decisions this week as I was sitting down trying to go through my rosters, and I'm higher on Johnny Wilson than most. I understand that. But I do think that even though it's a tough opponent against LSU, even though Keon Coleman is in and some folks expect him to be the top target there, I've just seen Johnny Wilson take over a game. And I think he's capable of doing that in any particular week. He's definitely inconsistent, but I think that the ceiling for Johnny Wilson is pretty close to sky high. And LSU, even though they are a very, very talented team, top 15 in my defensive roster strength numbers, the secondary is in transition. There's only one full-time starter back from last year. They're starting 2 transfers at corner in Zay Alexander and Deuce Chestnut. They've had some injuries there because an expected projected starter, J.K. Johnson's going to be out for the year with a lower body injury. So I don't think that this LSU matchup is as scary as maybe we want to think it is. And even though Johnny Wilson isn't everybody's favorite, I just think that when he is clicking on all cylinders, he can take over a game and is capable of like a 8 catches, 180 yards, 2 touchdowns type performance. So I am going for that upside and started Johnny Wilson everywhere this week.
Chris, you went full homer for this question. We really, we love when you do that. Why are we starting Antoine Wells this week?
He's by far the best skill position player on the South Carolina team. I don't like their secondary receivers. I just don't like their receiver room in general outside of Wells. I think that he has a pretty big day. He seems to be 100% healthy. He was battling some injuries. He practiced. I'm not concerned about the injury. His line currently is like 56.5. I've taken the over on that. But yeah, I think this game could potentially be a big shootout in Charlotte with Drake May on the other side. So, I mean, I think Wells could be in for a 10-target game, and this UNC defense is horrendous at tackling. They're terrible in general. I mean, Gene Chizik is not really doing a good job there, but I like Wells a lot. Great yak guy. I think if you're just tuning in for this game, he's a player to watch on the NFL draft radar. Pretty fun player, and I think he's going to have a big day.
Alfred, you're starting TCU running back. Is that correct here today?
Well, I was doing some digging, trying to find a name that was fun and interesting that maybe a lot of people aren't thinking of, and also thinking about who are guys on people's rosters, from years ago maybe, and they haven't cut Trey Sanders, who was a former 5-star running back going to Alabama, winds up on TCU, and I was shocked, not to keep calling out Nick, but his product is amazing. The way that we've got these projections, looking at the depth charts, which in the college game is so hard to find anything that you can rely on. Nick seemed to think Trey Sanders is going to be the guy. Now, DraftKings pricing and some other things seem to think it's going to be Manny Bailey as the number one guy. But if Trey Sanders is getting roughly half the work, maybe a goal line preferred and potentially 90 yards a game this year on average, I think this would be closer to a ceiling game for him. I think Colorado is going to be an absolute mess. I think they're going to be an absolute mess. And, if anything, they may be fun on offense. I don't see them being a good defensive team. And, I think this would be closer to a ceiling game. So if you're telling me Trey Sanders can get close to 100, maybe get in the end zone once, throw him in as a flex. He's probably rotting on your bench somewhere. You gave up on him, but he could be a useful guy this year if those projections are correct. And I would like him to be on the top end against Colorado in terms of his weekly expected output. So that's why I put him in there. A little risky, things we don't know for sure, but Nick and Ian Allen I trust.
And Nick, Ian Allen, we trust. That is correct. I'm starting all of the Akron wide receivers this week, and I feel pretty good about it. Alex Adams and Daniel George. I think we might talk about this later. I think that's a prime spot maybe for an upset. Akron's a 10-point dog right now. I think regardless, that line's a little too much. But Adams and George both saw pretty heavy targets last year. Really what differentiated them in fantasy was that Alex Adams had 9 touchdowns, and I believe George had 2 or something like that. I expect that number to kind of equalize this year. And so I think both of them are going to be startable this week. And an upset win for Akron. They're taking down Temple. I said it.
I don't hate it.
I said it live. Sitting. Who are we sitting this week? Nick, you've got some interesting names here, and I think there's the risk is not worth it here with these guys.
Yeah, my 2 biggest, the ones that hurt me the most. I mean, Jarquez Hunter, you saw on the rankings, was projected very, very high, and if we could trust 100% that he's going to play this week and play a relatively full amount of snaps, then I would certainly agree. But there's just so many unknowns. Every time anybody's asked Hugh Freeze about Jarquez Hunter, he sort of evaded the question. I think it's probably best to play it safe and wait until next week. Maybe Hunter's only suspended for a first half or something like that, or maybe he doesn't play at all this week. But I get the feeling that he's not going to be out there to start this game. And so with that in mind, if I've got better options, I'm putting him in there. And then this one hurts me the most. I am a huge Bryson Nesbitt fan. North Carolina tight end, and all fall he has been repping as the third tight end. So Nesbitt had a huge into last season. I think he's a big wide receiver. I think he actually could and maybe should factor in, especially if North Carolina is shorthanded at the wide receiver position. Yeah, he's just, the reports coming out of fall camp weren't great that he's looking up at 2 guys in front of him in the depth chart.
And with no Devontae Walker there, why wouldn't you just want as many big athletic dudes out there as you can possibly get received? I don't understand. I don't understand what they're doing there. Chris, sitting everybody's favorite guy who with the J who means nothing in their name, J. Michael Sturdivant, huh?
Yeah, he's an interesting case because they're favored versus North Texas. A lot of people are projecting the North Texas upset this week. I'm getting my cows mixed up. UCLA is favored by 14 versus Coastal Carolina.
That is confusing.
Yeah, UCLA versus Cal. I'm all over the place. He was at Cal last year, so he's a transfer in. I don't know what this quarterback position is going to look like exactly. I mean, we thought it could be Dante Moore. It's going to be Ethan Garbers. I don't know how aggressive this passing offense is going to be when they have Carson Steele and TJ Harden at running back. I think they might just run the entire game and put up 300 yards against Coastal. So I'm a little wary to start him. I think that if I had a better option, if I had either of the Akron receivers, I'd be pivoting to them over J. Michael Sturdivant. So I think a lot of people are going to start him, and it concerns me some because I hate trying to project an offense that I don't know who the quarterback is, and it's a fairly different situation than it was last year with Dorian Thompson-Robinson. So I'm trying to stay away from this unknown aspect.
We're getting some questions here. I want to toss those out before I come to you, Alfred. Somebody asked Jeremiah Hunter or Joshua Cephas. I actually think I prefer Cephas in this one.
I haven't seen that he's out either. Like a lot of people are talking about that in the chat. I haven't. I lean that he's playing confident, like pretty confidently. Unless
I also think we don't know. I mean, I think Sam Jackson for Cal is interesting, but because he's a runner, I'm not. We have no real idea what his passing competency is going to be like. I'm not sure I'd take a receiver for Cal until we kind of see the flop.
On a side note, I was actually talking about this with somebody this morning. I don't mind leaving some points on my bench swinging for the fences in week 1 if we're really unsure about a rule or, what kind of situation, what's going on with the team. So I'm fine if Sam Jackson looks great and Jeremiah Hunter looks awesome. I'm fine leaving him on the bench because we think assuming Joshua Cephas plays, like we know what he's going to do. He's really the only wide receiver there still standing from their great trio. So yeah, maybe Hunter looks amazing, but now you have that information for future weeks now. Yeah, now I can go start Jeremiah Hunter. I'd much rather be burned that way than the opposite. The opposite's just so much more annoying to me.
By the way, I've played the Sam Jackson under passing yards. If that, it was 261. I think it's 258 now.
It seemed a little high to me.
Yeah,
too.
that number's a little high.
Somebody asked.
He's not known to be he's a dual threat guy. I don't see him lighting up for 260, 300.
Somebody asked last flex spot: Daniel George, wide receiver at Akron; Lorenzo Lingard, running back at Akron; Jaquavius Marks down there at Mississippi State, and then Dante Thornton, Tennessee wide receiver. Which of those do we like most?
Two of my favorites, Marks and Thornton. I think Marks is the safest. I think Thornton has the biggest upside.
I think Thornton's an interesting. I know this isn't a DFS show, but I think he's an interesting pivot off Squirrel White and Brew McCoy. He could catch a long pass. And
they seem to be very happy with him in spring too. So
yeah, I mean on the depth chart, wasn't it him or Squirrel? Even though we were all saying Squirrel White, he was like a freaking top first round supplemental.
And Thornton's the one they've been moving around in different spots too. So.
For what it's worth, to stick to my previous point, I would probably play Daniel George because I know what this offense is. I know what his role is, and I probably know what to expect from him this week. Dante Thornton could have 6 for 180 and 2. He could also have 1 for 40 and nothing. So, I mean, I think that's college football in a nutshell. But I think week 1 especially, we just don't quite know yet.
Can I add a start?
Sure.
Real quick, based on some news that's coming out.
No, not
if I was desperate or in a deep league, I think I'd play Cedric Baxter this week.
All right, Felix, play Cedric Baxter.
Texas just released their depth chart, and Cedric Baxter is listed first with an or with Jonathan Brooks. So this is a game script that I think Texas might want to break in their new 5-star running back. Did he finish 5 stars? Whatever, 5-star
on at least one service.
I think
one service.
Yeah.
I think that you could play him this week. I think he's viable. I think he could get you 15 plus points. They play Rice. Not concerned about this Rice defense. He's first on the depth chart. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if he went for 101 or 102, straight up.
Now I'm trying to put on my my depth chart reading glasses. That is the only or that I see, right? No, there are a couple. And
only starting position or, right?
They all are alphabetically listed. So just
that's what I was going to mention. Baxter does come before Brooks alphabetically. So
there are 4. All are listed alphabetically.
I don't care, even if they're going to.
That's what I was going to say.
Against Rice, no, I'm still interested.
That's fair. Somebody asked, comfortable starting Kimani Vidal, the Troy running back. They get Stephen F. Austin today, or John Lee Eldridge, Air Force's running back, and they get RMU, Robert Morris. For anybody not familiar, a small school outside of Pittsburgh.
I would play Eldridge.
I would probably be fine with Eldridge. I don't know. I'd be okay playing both of them, especially if you just really need to toss somebody in there.
Yeah. So I'm worried about Asa Martin's role in that Troy offense, transferring from Memphis this year. I think he and Kimani Vidal might split a little bit, especially in the game that I don't really project to be that competitive. So, I mean, I would go with Eldridge, who, he's the Air Force running back. He's not the fullback type they've had it with Brad Roberts. He's a different type of player, but he's still going to be featured, I think. I think Robert Morris is worse than Stephen F. Austin is, too.
Yeah. So I worry that Eldridge might get 5 touches before he's out of the game. I think Vidal is going to have more opportunity, but Eldridge might have 5 touches and 100 yards. So I don't know.
This
But
is why this
Robert
week one
Wolf is really, really
calculus is so important, because half these teams are playing just total cupcakes, and it's just week 1, week 2.
The FCS games are so hard to know what the heck to do.
Very, very difficult. Somebody in the comments, who I'm not going to name their name out, I refuse, asked for a player comp for Cedric Baxter. Anybody have a good one? I actually don't know that I gave him a comp when I did his eval this year. He's pretty athletic. He's kind of in like the Todd Gurley mold of a running back. Like, that's kind of how he plays, but I don't think he's as explosive as that. So I'm trying to think of like the 80% version of Todd Gurley as I'm sitting here, which is not, can I just give that 80% Todd Gurley? I don't know. What do you guys think?
I saw a Melvin Gordon comp.
That's interesting. That's
good.
Probably 80% of Todd Gurley. So
it's not my comp, so I want to be. I don't remember where I saw it, but I thought that was a pretty interesting one.
Alfred, have any thoughts? You lead our recruiting team. Yeah.
Don't hate it. No, I don't really like to comp these guys. They all have. I know it's valuable and helpful, but I don't really like to do that. I mean, the big thing for him was big, fast depth chart for me. He is like 210, 220, I believe. And we clocked him, I'm pretty sure, over 21 miles per hour. My big thing with him was not too shifty, a little bit straight line. I didn't think he had a lot of start-stop wiggle. And then not a lot of evidence of pass catching. Again, that does not mean he cannot do it. Sometimes we just don't see that in these high school offenses. So, but big, fast, and a good depth chart to go to. And if he's going to get the ball against Rice, I like it. So, but to answer the person who will not be named, I don't have a good comp. But Melvin Gordon seems okay, although Melvin Gordon definitely was a pass catcher on the NFL level.
He wasn't really in college, though, either, right? So, I mean,
right. At Wisconsin.
That's actually a really interesting parallel there as well. I think if he's a good pass catcher, we'll know, though, by the time he gets to the NFL with how Sark uses these running backs overall. Real quick, I do just want to say, Alfred, you're saying to sit CJ Donaldson, the West Virginia tight end turned running back here. For what it's worth, I completely agree with you.
Oh, wow, that's a relief. Well, yeah, I mean,
it's worth.
I tried to pick someone who would otherwise probably be a starter for teams. They drafted him as a starter. If you've got C.J. Donaldson as a keeper from last year, or you drafted him this year, you probably thought he would be a flex play at least. But today, 3 touchdown dogs against a much, much, much better Penn State team. I don't think it's the time to go for it.
Is that the week 1 game with the most closing line value if you took it when it opened?
That's a Mox question.
It opened at 16, I believe. I have a 16 ticket, I'm pretty sure.
I do too.
Alfred just said 3 scores, and I'm curious if it got
I think it's 20.5 last I checked.
21 and 20. Yeah, between 20 and 21. The game with the most closing line value is going to be, I think, Colorado State, which opened at 17, and it's at 9.
Okay, so yeah. We did good, though. That was so bad. That was such a bad line.
We gave... By the way, if you remember at Campus2Canton, we were. I mean, the minute that these dropped, we were hitting them, and we were in the Discord talking about it. So we have some really nice tickets. I mean, we had UCF 30.5, and they closed like 36 or 37 too. So a lot of nice closing line value from June.
I'm allowed to give one line that I like every year, and that was the one I gave. So I think long and hard about it before I do that. Before we go to break here, Tracer asked, what's the game you're most excited to watch today? Nick, what's the game you're most excited to watch today? What do you like?
The one that jumps in my mind first is that South Alabama Tulane game. I've had that circled for a while.
That's a sicko answer. By the way. I love it. That's a sicko answer.
I'm really, really high on South Alabama. I think there's a chance that they represent the Group of 5 in the New Year's Six this year. They get an opportunity to see what they can do against the team that did that last season. So that's the one that pops in my mind first.
Alfred?
Don't hate that answer. Probably one of the more sicko answers. But I'll just change it up and go Boise State, Washington. I mean, we know Washington's a great team. They will challenge for the Pac-12 title, no doubt about it. And then Boise State, very interesting. Taylor Green, I think, is starting, right? I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. He should be the starter, right? But on DraftKings, there's another quarterback for Boise State who's actually listed as a more expensive option, which does not make any sense. But Taylor Green is a guy who could rise up some Debbie boards this year as a dual threat option. Maybe he lights the world on fire and transfers to a P5 school next year, something like that, and really gets himself on the NFL radar if he can improve his passing. But, that's what happens with these guys. They start off as major runners. That we saw him last year as redshirt freshman. I think multiple 100-yard rushing games. But if he can get that arm in check, he could be a big riser this year. So I'm excited to see him. Ashton Jainty, friend of the show, friend of the website. Love to see him out there. So that game's just full of players I just want to watch.
Chris? Not allowed to say South Carolina, by the way. Nothing.
Yeah,
tomorrow anyway.
I was good. No, it's today. Come on.
I thought it was tomorrow.
No, only game tomorrow is Oregon State.
You're right.
San Jose State,
It's
which is an interesting game. So the one that I have the most vested interest in is, God, I hate giving these sicko games out too. I'm really interested in Akron Temple because I think Akron's going to take a step forward on offense this year. And I think the offensive line is going to be better. And they're 10-point dogs. And I don't buy that at all, that they should be double-digit dogs against Temple, because I think Temple's offense is really good. So I'm sitting here and I'm looking at the 55. I think over 55 is in play. I mean, we'll talk about our picks later. And I got Akron plus 10.
That is the sickest, most disgusting.
You could have said like Southern Miss Alcorn State or something. So,
yeah, I kept
the bottom of the barrel for
kept it FBS. I'm also pretty interested to see Baylor, Texas State, because I want to see what Texas State does with GJ Kinney, who's coming in from Incarnate Ward to be the head coach at Texas State. So that should be interesting.
I mean, I think the easy answer is Colorado TCU, because I don't really know what either of those teams is going to truly look like this year.
You're so mainstream, bro.
But to go off that game, this is going to sound goofy. I'm actually really interested for this Texas A&M New Mexico game, because they've had a bunch of Ferraris parked in the garage for so long and refused to use them.
Mexico?
And yes, New Mexico. Texas A&M has, sorry. I'm curious to see if there is any sort of jazzier offensive system this year, as we've been promised. And quite frankly, every week that's going to be a game that I tune in to see whether Bobby Petrino or Jimbo kill each other on the sideline. So I think that's going to be, unless is one of them in the box to keep them separated, they might do that. Do
we know who's actually calling plays?
No, we don't. That's the thing. But I do think Jimbo is not above getting in the elevator, going up to the box and strangling him with the mic cord.
The most recent thing I've heard was that Jimbo said Petrino was calling plays.
Jimbo said
we'll see how long that lasts, but that is the last thing that was said, I believe.
So there we go. All right. I see there's a couple more questions that are coming in. We're going to go to break here. We will answer them on the other side of the break. So stay around. This is Campus to Canton here on the Better Sports Network.
It's college football game day, and we're getting you ready for all the action on Campus to Canton.
So let's get into some best ball philosophy here.
Yeah.
In your experience, going back many, many, many years, drafting in national tournaments, Bradley, have you historically been shying away from the running back position in favor of wide receivers? In favor of, if you're drafting in the FFPC tight end premium format, in favor of tight ends as well. Is that the smart play when you're drafting this early in the drafting season?
Yeah, so taking value is going to be huge, and looking at like running backs and wide receivers, like you want to take a look at how the structure is. So you mentioned earlier the FFPC has a couple different types, like they've got super flex and one quarterback. So that's going to change your strategy a little bit. If you have only 2 wide receivers, or if you're drafting 3 wide receivers. And of course, the PPR is a different aspect compared to other formats or other tournaments. And so keeping in mind the pass catching upside of some of the running backs may be more valuable in those formats. So the Austin Eckler's, the Christian McCaffreys may be more value because they get more receptions, and so like I loved taking late shots a couple of years ago on like the JD McKissicks of the world, who would get 50 receptions really cheaply. So that's something to consider. But when it comes to like overall value, like you're in the middle of a draft, and you just noticed that, I don't know, maybe it's Chris Godwin has fallen 14 spots, but Chris Godwin was not in your plans to be drafting. Like maybe you don't have a strong player take on Chris Godwin, or my take is that I don't think the Bucs are going to be particularly good this year. But for him to be dropping, let's say 14 spots is more than a full round. And based on the data that we've seen, if you get to draft a player more than 12 spots ahead or behind ADP, so they drop 12 or more spots, you have an 84% edge over the rest of the tournament players who are drafting this player, because typically this player isn't going to drop. The average draft position is a really strong indicator of where a player is going to go. And I think that is also on the flip side. If you are reaching too much, you're giving up value in your drafts. And so when it comes to value-based drafting, you need to consider, just because this guy isn't my plans or I don't have a strong player take on him, maybe that's your opportunity to sprinkle in some shares of this player at a good price.
It's Campus2Canton here on the Better Sports Network. Austin, Nick, Alfred, and Chris all here. Chris doing his best Jimmy Buffett impression down on the left. Alfred, what happened to the hat? We had two Jimmy Buffetts pre-show.
It was pre-show. The way the camera, it was too big. It didn't work, so I took it off. But Chris really pulls it off nicely.
Alfred worried about what he looks like on camera. Come on now. So never expected this day. Keep sending your questions in, guys. If you want to call in, there is a link in on the YouTube page. You can call in and ask us a question or give your opinion on something here. We just finished talking games that we're most excited to watch this week. Producer Will says Liberty Bowling Green. So we continued the sicko trend here and went for one of the deeper cuts here this week. We are
Liberty going to be without a starting defensive tackle, one of the best interior defensive linemen in the country. FYI.
Wow.
Do you think that puts Bowling Green +8 in play?
I should have been prepared for that question.
Sorry, because I've been looking at that number all
I
week.
have Bowling Green +8.5. I took it.
I think it's kind of interesting.
Before the news, my main projection had Liberty at 8.6. Adjusted, it's going to come down a little bit, but not a ton. Under
point.
8. So not.
That sounds about right.
Yeah, I don't have a great read on it.
I challenge you to go listen to College Game Day and hear them talk about the Liberty defensive tackle being out today and how it affects the betting line. I dare you. Guess
I
what?
made this
They're
game 12.5. Sheesh. But I also, Liberty is the strongest home field advantage in the country per my data. So sorry, not to get too into the weeds in Bowling Green Liberty.
It's good stuff. That's why people tune in. A couple other questions here real quick, guys, that people have asked. Somebody asked, I have CJ Donaldson. My other options are Marcus Major, DeCarry, and Joyner. I low-key kind of like DeCarry and Joyner this week.
I know you do.
I like him more than Donaldson. I'll say that. I like him more than Donaldson this week.
I think I'd play Joyner too.
I have a couple of props. We'll talk about him in a second here on Prize Picks or plays on Prize Picks. I kind of like, I'm not expecting 30 points, but I think you can get 15 points out of DeCarry and Joyner, depending on your league settings.
Do we think he attempts a pass today? Trick play pass?
Oh,
former quarterback.
Can I get those odds somewhere? Bovada probably has it up.
You can go overseas for that probably.
Somebody asked Carson Steele or Ray Davis. I like Ray Davis today.
Yeah.
I'm on Carson Steele under.
You're on
yeah,
Carson
there's
Steele
a little question about if Carson Steele is going to be the guy, right? I mean,
that's what we're talking about. Which positions do we know what the guy's going to be doing this week? I think Ray Davis is one we know.
We know Ray Davis is going to be the workhorse. I mean, 20+ touches easy, I think.
It's week 1. Don't get fancy, folks. Jim asks, was Buckley's usage last night a one-off? It's the big question, right? I don't know. What do we think? Anybody have an opinion, Nick?
Yeah, I don't know. Good question. Haven't had enough time to
I mean, is 30 carries really a
dig into
one-off?
it.
Like, you're not getting 30 carries in the second half. I mean, he must have played all game. Now, is he going to be good? I don't know, but seems like he's the guy.
Well, so there. Okay, I do.
There's an injury I don't remember.
There was an injury. Yeah, King,
Okay.
Keyshawn King got knocked out.
Oh, that's right.
He was the starter. Zahir Abbasalam got 20 carries. So King was a starter, had 7 carries, got knocked out. And then Western Michigan is going at a much, much faster pace than they have in the past. We had heard had heard that suggested. That does appear to be the case. They are running a lot of plays and they are running a lot. So King, will he be back next week? If so, that could hurt Buckley just a little bit. Looks like they do want to get 2 running backs going. But Buckley, obviously, huge game, and I would expect it is going to be difficult to keep off the field. But I am just a little bit cautious about his high-end upside because of the Virginia Tech transfer in King. And then also that, 2 guys got 20 carries.
I also want to note that this was against St. Francis, by the way, and I have Western Michigan as like a bottom 10 team in the country. So I don't know how much fantasy value you're going to get on a week-to-week basis from this Western Michigan offense.
Jack Salopek love? You're not a big Jack Salopek guy?
I'm mad that he started. I thought it was going to be.
All right, we got a couple other questions here real quick. Tanner asked, where are your weekly rankings? They are on Campus2Canton.com, Tanner. If you go up to the top bar, there's a big thing that says rankings. It drops down and it has CFF projections weekly. You can see all of them there. You can break it out by position. You can search by name. You can do whatever you want there, play around with those a little bit. Someone said flex Dalvin Smith, the Western Kentucky wide receiver, or Johnny Wilson. Short answer, what do we think here? I think I prefer Smith here just because with no Matheson, I think that kind of eliminates some guesswork for us, but maybe not.
I would play Smith.
Yeah, there's a good chance that Smith's going to be the wide receiver 2 for Western Kentucky. Even though I am starting Wilson or tight end 1. Yeah, well, cheating. But yeah, so I think Smith's the right answer.
Alfred, make it 4 for 4. Don't have to.
Yeah, I'm not going against consensus here. I'm not a big Johnny Wilson guy either. Okay. So I'm fine going Dalvin Smith.
Todd asked real quick, guys, who do I sit CJ Donaldson for? Katron Allen, Dante Thornton, Xavier Weaver, Andrew Paul, Zachariah Branch, or Greathouse?
I think it's got to be Thornton at this point.
It's one of those first
Thornton,
3.
I mean, Allen's going to get enough. And
it's not going to be Paul, Branch, or Greathouse. I don't think Colorado's going to – I don't think Weaver has a chance to have a massive day. Katron Allen's still splitting time with Nick Singleton. I mean, they're big favorites, but I don't know exactly what his role is going to be. So, I mean, Thornton is the upside play there. Katron Allen's probably the safe play if you're leaning that way.
Yeah, I think that's the way to look at it. If you're a favorite, you feel pretty good about the rest of your team, just go Allen to lock in, 6 to 10 points. Thornton, if you feel like you need 20.
All right, let's talk some prize picks here, guys. If you're not familiar, prize picks lists different totals for players, so whether that's fantasy points, yardage, receptions, etc. You play between 2 and 6 of them now. That's been added since last year, and depending on how many hit, you win some money. So we're here to help you do that. And if you've never used it before, why don't you head over to Prize Picks, enter promo code C2C, just three characters, C2C, get 100% deposit match on your first deposit up to $100. So we're going to get you $100 free. Then we're going to win you a lot more. I'll tell you what, I'm already 2 for 2 this week on props that have played. We're moving here, boys. Nick, I want to
you nailed Ricky Pearsall the other night.
That was such a slam dunk. 9.5 fantasy points. I was like, this dude's going to have 9 catches.
Yeah. You nailed it.
PPR, yeah, all day. Nick, I want to come over to you first. And these may have moved a little bit, but we picked these all within the last 24 hours or so they shouldn't have moved too much. What do you like today?
Yeah, so another place for projections as well. If you're a C2C or all 22, C2C Winning Edge or all 22 member, drop my projections in the Discord channel there. But one that jumped out to me a little bit earlier was JT Daniels, now at Rice, playing Texas this week. His passing yard listed was 147.5. My projection is actually 206. So see some value there. Sam Jackson was mentioned earlier in the show. When I first saw it, it was 261.5 just before we started. Today it was 250.5, but that's still considerably over my projection of 206. Joe Milton, I love Joe Milton. Maybe my favorite player. Most excited to watch him this year. But my projection is under the current 277.5. I've got 239 today versus Virginia, but Virginia will, sounds like, most likely be without their best pass rusher. And then I alluded to it earlier, but Carson Steele under 77.5. My projection is 57 for the UCLA running back 2, which is where I've got Steele slotted right now. TJ Harden had been repping with the ones, and there's a 3-way or on the depth chart with Harden, Steele, and Colson Yankoff, who I think is likely to get some goal line short yardage work. But if you go UCLA running back 1, and my projections is 76. So even if Steele's the top guy on the depth chart, it's in the ballpark there. So I think we see under 77.5 this week.
Chris?
Yeah, there's actually a lot of good value this week with not knowing who's starting, who's not starting, what the role's going to be, etc. But I'm going to mostly stick with guys I know, which is kind of the theme for this show, right? Austin Reed, West Kentucky quarterback, over 25.5 fantasy points. I mean, this dude could just put up 40. The game total of this game is 70, and Western Kentucky all week was favored by like 11. They're getting money this morning, but I mean, I would play them up to 13. I just think they're going to score a ton of points. This USF defense is terrible, and so is Western Kentucky, so USF might score a little bit. But yeah, I mean, he can run. Scored a bunch of rushing touchdowns last year. It's electric passing offense. So I like that 25.5. And I mean, yeah, I'd play that up to like 27.5, 28.5. I also like Xavier Worthy over 12.5 fantasy points. This line actually dropped, and I don't understand why.
It dropped. I played it at 13.5, and I feel like
Me
I
too.
got jobbed here.
I don't understand why it dropped, because Xavier Worthy can get this on like the first play of the game. Like he's deep threat, can take top off the defense. A 60-yard catch for a touchdown is all you need for this, and he can easily do this against Rice. I don't think Rice's secondary is all that good. It's pretty weak. So I don't understand why that line dropped. I'm playing it. I'm all over this worthy number, to be honest. I have it in quite a few lineups. And Drake May over 301.5 pass and rush yards. A lot of this is Drake May just being awesome. And I think there's a little bit of worry without Tez Walker. But I mean, I like their secondary options too. Nate McCollum, we talked about Kobe Pacer earlier. Those are two still really good receivers. And South Carolina's defense is good, and their secondary is probably the strongest piece of that unit. At least their safeties are. But it's Drake May, man. I'm not doubting him. He could also run the ball. So when you're getting pass and rush at 301.5, I'm fine taking that. And I think this defense is going to be a sieve all game. So we might just have to keep throwing as well. So I'm all over Drake May. This line dropped as well. I mean, I'm on the wrong side of movement on both these last two, but I still feel pretty confident.
Fair enough. Alfred, what do you like this week?
Yeah, the first two I still feel okay about. Roma Dunze versus Boise over 17 fantasy points. I think this game is going to be fairly competitive. In fact, I like Boise to cover 14 points. I think Boise's pretty good, and so is Washington. They're both good teams. But I just don't think there's going to be like an out-of-hand type game. So, I mean, I think Odunze will stay involved the entire game and, catch 7-8 passes. That gets you halfway there on receptions alone. So we project him to be at 23. So I kind of went through our projections and saw where we were going versus the line is only 17 for him, or 17.5. JJ McCarthy, I know I pooped on him earlier, but over 14.5 fantasy points, that just feels so low for a quarterback going against ECU. He probably has to throw 2 touchdowns to get there, but just seems, I don't know. It seems like he'll get that done. And even though I don't think Michigan's going to push it. I mean, 14.5 is just such a low bar for a quarterback against a bad team that should, even if they pull him at halftime, or he'll play 3 quarters, I think, anyway. And then Austin Jones. Oh, by the way, JJ McCarthy, we have him at 22.4. So again, our C2C projections has that about 8 points ahead of the line. This one at the end, I'm a little more nervous about. Austin Jones versus Nevada over 13.5 felt super low. I went back and looked. He did not catch a pass against San Jose State and only had 6 rushes. Now he scored twice, but they're just really being generous with their deployment of pretty much everybody on that USC team. That game, they just used 1 million receivers and 1 million running backs. And so I don't know if this is a great number, but it just seems like he'll likely get in the end zone, and that gets you almost all the way to 13.5 or over or about halfway. So that one gets a much less confidence rating, but Nevada's bad. They should be able to kind of hand the ball off and just do whatever they want on offense. I think Austin Jones gets in the end zone and gets over 13.5, but that one I have less confidence in.
For what it's
I
worth,
played his rushing over last week or this week, 51.5. If that gives you any confidence, I have this.
I actually like that more than the fantasy points. Weird,
because he doesn't have to get in the end zone.
Yeah, and usually it's the opposite. Usually I prefer the fantasy points because there's more outs, but I kind of like that rush line more. Interesting.
They might be the worst D line in the country, or if they're not, they're pretty darn close to it.
Nevada,
yeah, Nevada.
Yeah. I just have a couple. I have a couple here real quick. As I mentioned earlier, I really liked Kerryon Joyner today. I like both of his lines, which haven't moved at all. 49.5 rush yards and a fantasy score of 10.5. I mean, the guy's he can catch passes, so I think if you want to play fantasy score, I think there's some potential there as well. But I think he rushes for over 50 yards pretty comfortably today. UNC not exactly known for their prolific rush defense there, and actually I find that Hampton plus Joyner, they're doing this new thing this year where they'll like combine 2 players and then like you can take like a total for the 2 of them. They have Amari and Hampton and Kerryon Joyner at 91.5 combined. I think that's a really interesting line too if you think that Hampton gets the bulk of the carries here today, because as Chris said, South Carolina's front isn't necessarily the best part of this defense. So that's an interesting line to me too. I'm not playing it, but I think it's interesting. And then I have Chandler Morris under 55.5 rush yards, and I actually don't know if that's moved at all. I should check that real quick.
I think
it's down to 45. It's down to 45.
Shoot, man,
that's getting close now.
9.5, by the way.
Yeah, that's getting close. I don't know if I love that anymore. Yeah, that's probably tight. I'd stick with Joyner at that stage. Yeah. All right, guys. We are going to answer some more questions. I see him down there. But real quick, let's go into. We have Corey, our head Devy guy. If you're not familiar, Devy is just a form of fantasy football where you basically draft some of these guys where they're still in college. They don't produce any points or anything for you, but then once they graduate, they go to your NFL roster. Our Devy team lead, Corey, is looking at some guys that he thinks are going to make that jump and are going to impress today. So, Corey, take it away with today's Devy segment.
What is going on, Campus2Canton family? Corey Prairie here from the Campus2Canton Devy team, and week 1 is finally here. Week 0 was a nice tease, got to see a couple teams play, but week 1 finally gives us all those answers we've been waiting for. All those storylines, position battles, quarterback battles. It's going to be a fun week of watching football. Let's go. Now, going back a little bit into the week, we did get to see some games play already, and that included the debut of one Mr. Jaden Rashad, a true freshman quarterback for Arizona State. Passed for 236 yards, 2 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, so protected the ball really well, including a nice 47-yard touchdown to Xavier Guillory. 0 turnover-worthy plays according to PFF, which was a nice touch. He really showed off some of that arm talent that was really making waves in camp this spring, that really propelled him to that starting position at the top of this quarterback battle throughout the spring and summer. He showed some typical signs of a freshman as well. He was rushing the play sometimes on some of those quicker passes, was missing some of the guys. They were also dealing with some crazy weather over there. So all in all, I thought it was a pretty good debut for him. I wouldn't be surprised if Jaden Rashada pushes for a top 3 or 4 round pick in next year's drafts. Speaking of freshman quarterbacks, we really don't get to see many start nowadays, especially in the new world of NIL and the new world of the transfer portal. Guys can bring guys in to fill positions that they want or lure other quarterbacks in with NIL deals to come get them to fill a spot instead of relying on a young guy. But there are 2 freshman quarterbacks that I think do have a pretty good chance to see playing time this year, and that starts with UCLA's Dante Moore and Iowa State's quarterback J.J. Cole. Now, Dante Moore started camp really strong. The reports coming out made it seem like he might even have a chance to push for that starting role on day one. But, as camp kind of went on, there was some not-so-glowing reports about maybe some arm fatigue. I personally think that some of those reports were a little bit overblown. But I still think, he has that talent there that made him the quarterback 2 in my class. He's one of the most experienced passers in this class. And we know Ethan Garbers is the guy that's going to hold a position for now. But the things you've kind of heard about him have been consistent and protecting the ball and making it safe. So I feel like he's the safe play right now. But the upside still lies with Dante Moore. So I really wouldn't be surprised if we see Moore get in at some time in the season, especially if that offense is struggling for any reason. Now, Iowa State quarterback J.J. Cole, on the other hand, is a big kid with a big arm, a little bit of mobility to him as well. The spring reports around him have been glowing all offseason. Now, he wasn't really thought of to be in contention for this starting spot until the expected starter, Hunter Deckers, kind of got wrapped up in that Iowa State gambling problem they got going on right now. It doesn't look like he's going to be an option this year. They're going to go with Rico Beck to begin with, but if Rico Beck can't get this offense moving and they think the future of this program is with J.J. Cole, I wouldn't be surprised to see him get in sooner than later. Now, looking over at Mizzou, who got to play a little bit earlier in the week, we got to see a sneak peek into that new role that Luther Burns going to be having entering this year. He definitely acted as a top target, catching the ball, running the ball, or returning kicks, but there are going to be some people still concerned out there about that low ADOT usage that hovered around 5.6 yards. Looking at you, Nelly, but I'm here to tell you that I'm not really that concerned about it. If we look at this game as a whole, they really weren't tested defensively. The easy stuff was working, and you have a quarterback who's coming off an injury. I really think as the season goes on and they're tested a little bit more defensively and Brady Cook has to open it up a little bit more, we're going to see some more opportunities down the field. Either way, I thought this was a nice start for his role heading into this year. Another polarizing wide receiver that I'm going to be watching this week is one that might not even be playing wide receiver at the next level, and that's wide receiver / defensive back Travis Hunter over at Colorado. Now, there's been a huge emphasis on this guy playing more offense this offseason, to the point where Coach Prime was getting upset when he was seeing him play defense in practice. And Travis Hunter is the type of guy who's been tabbed as a potential first-round pick at either defensive back or a wide receiver. And while I think he's pretty unrefined at wide receiver, he's a natural athlete at any position that he plays. Now, Colorado should struggle defensively, which should give more opportunities for Travis Hunter to be on the offensive side of the ball. And, with the way some of these contracts are going in the NFL, wide receivers are getting a lot higher contracts than cornerbacks right now. So I'm hoping that Travis Hunter is going to want to chase that bag and chase that money and hopefully locks himself in at wide receiver and chases that at the next level. Now, there's a lot of new quarterbacks and new positions this week, and I'm sure the guys at Tailgate have already been talking about it. How does Jalen Milroe look in his first start for Alabama? How does Cal McCord look in his first start for Ohio State? Are they going to do enough to fend off their talented backups that are pushing them? How does Carson Beck look in his first start for the two-time national defending championship Georgia Bulldogs? But the one guy that I'm going to be watching this week is in the Battle of the Carolinas, and that's UNC quarterback Drake May. He started the season on fire last year and really didn't pull his foot off the gas until about a 4-game stretch down the end of the season where he kind of raised some red flags, but all his play before that pretty much positioned himself to be a top 2 selection in next year's NFL draft. But over the last 4 games where he saw some tougher defenses, he saw his passing yards drop over 100 yards a game. He saw his touchdown interception ratio go to a 1-to-1. And then he even saw his completion percentage dip to below 60%. I mean, was this just hitting a wall? Did this have to do with Josh Downs dealing with a little bit of an injury? I'm going to be eager to see how he bounces back from this 0-4 finish that he had last year. And now we're talking about a new wide receiver core as well. We're talking about a new offensive coordinator, Chip Lindsey, that doesn't have the same track record as Phil Longo. So this is going to be a year with a lot of adversity for Drake May, and it'll be interesting to see how he climbs out of it. Now, I haven't talked about running backs much today, and it was around this time last year that I actually started to pick out Trey Benson a little bit as a guy you guys should be watching. Let's see if I can strike gold again and tell you a guy that's a little bit under the radar for me. And I'm heading over to Syracuse to talk about their running back taking over for Sean Tucker, and that's one Mr. LaQuint Allen. Now, he didn't get a ton of touches throughout his freshman season where he opened on the depth chart as the running back 2 behind Sean Tucker last year, but he did flash some big play potential. He flashed some versatility, catching the ball, passing the ball, throwing the ball even, and he finally got that start in that bowl game when Sean Tucker sat out. He had 11 receptions. That was the most by a Syracuse player in like the past decade. He totaled over 100 scrimmage yards, so I'm really looking forward to him becoming the guy this year, and I think that versatility is going to bode well for his transition to the NFL. He really gives me some Rashad White vibes with that big play potential and that pass catching potential. Now let's take a look at some of the bigger matchups this week, and starting with LSU versus FSU this week. Now, FSU has done a lot to bolster their roster this offseason, especially with the addition of a guy like Keon Coleman from Michigan State, a guy that has been tabbed as a potential first-round pick. He really plays a lot of that bully ball style, wins above the rim. I'm still going to be looking for him to develop a little bit more of a route tree and not rely so much on that athleticism if he's going to meet those lofty projections as a potential first-round pick. One of the more surprising developments in this wide receiver core was seeing that Destin Hill earn the starting position in the slot coming out of camp. And this was a former top 20 wide receiver in the 2021 wide receiver class. He had some off-field issues that kept him away from football for the past 2 years. Nothing illegal or anything like that. Some family issues that kept him off the field. But he's a nice contrast player to the two towering guys they have on the outside. He's more of your quick-footed guy, a route-running separation type guy that can run in the middle of the field. He should see a lot of opportunities in the middle of the field for Jordan Travis and FSU this year. On the other side of the ball, I'm really looking at those depth positions at LSU. You know, they really haven't had anybody flash at the wide receiver 2 position or the running back 2 position in some time right now. And I'm looking towards those true freshmen that are coming in running back Caleb Jackson and wide receiver Shelton Sampson Jr. Despite fracturing his ankle during his high school senior season, Caleb Jackson already came to LSU this spring and was running a 10.800 meter dash during the spring. I mean, he's at 215 pounds. He's got that size-speed combo that we love to see, and he was reportedly getting some first-team reps towards the end of the camp, so possibly he could emerge as a guy who's a running back 2 behind Logan Diggs this year. Shelton Sampson Jr. is a long, lanky wide receiver, very athletic, though. We have him clocked around 21 miles per hour. He's a little bit unrefined, though, so I was pretty surprised to hear that he was getting first-team reps throughout the end of camp there. So he's a guy that could emerge behind Malik Neighbors for a team that really doesn't have any solidified options behind him. Heading over to our final matchup of the week, and that's going to be Duke going up against Clemson. And the biggest thing for Clemson this year is how Garrett Riley, the new OC coming over from TCU, can help unlock Cade Klubnik and help him further develop his abilities. I mean, he's been the kind of guy that I've had a hard time getting on board with, but the sample size is just too small to judge right now, so I'm really hoping Garrett Riley can bring over some of those things he did for Max Duggan over at TCU and help Cade Klubnik take the next step in his development. One of the players I'm going to be watching pretty closely is how Adam Randall looks now 2 years removed from that ACL. You know, he was able to get on the field in year one and clear some of those year 1-0 hurdles, which we love to see, but he could really take his game to the next step if everything's lining up for him. The buzz has been nothing but positive since the end of spring. Some players are even tabbing him as a potential breakout player. I mean, this was a guy that was in contention to be my wide receiver 1 in the class. I mean, this might be a little bit bold, but by the time the NFL draft comes around, if everything goes right, I would not be surprised to see Adam Randall be the highest valued Clemson wide receiver entering his draft year. On the other side of the ball, I'll really be watching to see how Riley Leonard continues to develop this year. I mean, this is a guy who's progressively got better year after year, but now he's getting some of those lofty projections into day 1 of the NFL draft, maybe early day 2 selection, but I really haven't been on board with some of those thoughts, so I'm going to be really watching to see how he develops this year, especially as a passer. Now, I'll finish it off here with a little bit of a deep sleeper, and that's going to be Duke wide receiver Jordan Moore. Now, this was a guy who came into the league as a quarterback in 2021, was in a competition with Riley Leonard for that starting position, ended up losing the competition, obviously. Now, entering 2022, he decides, I'm going to switch to wide receiver. He earned 60 targets in his first season, just under 700 yards and 6 touchdowns on the year. Over the last 3 weeks, he earned 36 targets, including a 200-yard game versus Pittsburgh, which really flashed some of his potential. I mean, for a guy who just started playing wide receiver, I feel like he's just scratching the surface of his potential. I'm going to be eager to see how he builds on that end-of-year performance that he put on. Now that's going to wrap up this week's Devy session. Make sure you guys are checking out the Back to Devy podcast, the #1 Devy podcast on the Campus2Canton channel. Don't let anybody else tell you different. And make sure you guys are heading over to Campus2Canton.com to check out everything we have to offer over there and keep you updated on everything Devy throughout the entire season.
All right. Thank you, Corey, for giving us a lowdown on all the Devy guys we should be watching here this weekend. Real quick, we're going to do an injury check-in. We're going to go to break, and then when we come back, we're going to hit Nick and Chris's best picks and then give some picks for the biggest games of the day.
You got to give.
You got to give. Sounds like Jarquez Hunter is out today, the Auburn running back. So according to Ethan Sowers, one of the guys that works with us, does some really deep message board sleuthing. And it does sound like he's not playing today. Suspension likely. So Damari Alston, does this make him a big play today? I slotted him into a lineup while we were watching that. I'm not going to lie. Everybody think so? Cool. Okay.
I'm a little. I personally would have projected the Auburn running back situation a little higher. Like I would have expected it, but my projections are a little lower than I thought they would be. So I personally would hold off, but I get the thinking for sure.
It sounds like both the tight ends at Ole Miss are out today, Caden Prieskorn and Michael Trigg, for various reasons. So adjust accordingly there. Alton McCaskill, the running back, transferred from Houston to Colorado. Sounds like he's doubtful. He's listed top of the depth chart with Dylan Edwards, though. So does that mean we see a lot of Dylan Edwards today? Don't play him. That's not what I'm saying. Don't do that. But I mean, I don't know what to expect there. Cavassier Smoke and Dylan Edwards splitting.
What about Edwards in DFS?
Alfred, this is not a DFS show. I don't know. I don't know anything about DFS.
Plays DFS. Come on.
There's only one or, if you're into depth chart reading, Edwards or McCaskill. McCaskill, the doubtful comes from sort of what we've heard, what's been reported the last week or so. Sounded like he was really slow in getting back. So even if he does play, I wouldn't expect he's full speed. But sounds like Edwards is clearly ahead of Smoke, but it is a fairly deep running back's a position where Colorado is particularly deep. So not sure he gets a heavy workload, but it does sound like he's in line to get the most work.
Two other real quick ones. Sounds like Caden McNamara is going to play for Iowa. They're starting quarterback. There were at one point everyone was basically ruling him out for the week, but now it sounds like he's playing, so that's nice. How much am I going to need to drink today to stomach this Iowa offense? Until we see otherwise, just do what you did last year. As we've been talking all show, we know the situation. Do what you did last year. Drink until we're proven otherwise. Brady Hunt, tight end at Ball State, sounds more probable than questionable there. So you might be thinking about starting him. I think that's a good shout there. All right, we're going to go to break.
Wait, I got one more big one.
Okay.
Curtis Rourke is out for Ohio.
Oh, that's actually huge. Yeah. So real quick, actually, let's touch on what that means on the other side of this break. Does that sound all right, Chris?
Sounds good.
Okay. All right. We'll be back. This is Campus to Canton on Better Sports.
I feel like this is a quietly contentious point in Dynasty Fantasy Football, what it means to actually be rebuilding. Some people say you should never truly be rebuilding. How do you view the rebuilding versus competing dichotomy in Dynasty?
So I will be the first person to acknowledge that my preferred format of fantasy football is just redraft. The years that I have played Dynasty, it has been I've drafted a win now team because I've seen people that have just gotten into the cycle of rebuilding and thus they just don't make any progress. So if you're rebuilding for the 5th year in a row, I just, I don't know exactly how you get out of it, but yeah, it's definitely something that can happen. And a lot of people, especially when we come out of the NFL draft, everyone's just instantly shipping off, draft picks and everything. So, I mean, it's definitely something that can happen.
Joey, do you feel similarly to it? Do you feel like you see people getting stuck in the rebuilding loop?
I mean, I would say people that try to rebuild in the beginning of seasons, of their fantasy seasons, I see them get stuck in that rut. I would really try to only ever rebuild if I knew I was going to miss the playoffs. Like, I'm always trying to play to win, even if it's maybe, I don't know.
I think my big thing is the word rebuild is a much shorter time frame than I think most people say it should be. Like, they look at rebuild as like 3 years out competing. Rebuild, you're looking to compete next season. You know what I mean? Like, if you're doing it now, you're looking to revamp, and maybe there's a one season where you ship it off, but that very next season you should be competing. If you're doing it like that, I'm cool with it, but you gotta have a plan, not just keep getting the young players, keep getting the draft picks. Otherwise, you end up like Tim. Maybe not like Tim who gets a bye, but you make the playoffs, you're in that like 4 to 6 range every year, just hovering in the middle. Nothing ever gets better, nothing ever gets worse.
I think I play like you in Dynasty, Simon. I play in 3-year windows.
100%. That's my go-to. And with the rate at which Dynasty leagues turn over, you should really only ever play in a 3-year window.
Missed that marching band sound here this offseason. Campus to Canton here on Better Sports Network. Austin Nace, Nicholas Ian Allen, Chris Moxley, Alfred Fernandez. We're going to talk some betting. But before we do that, guys, Curtis Rourke, Ohio quarterback, out this week. There, we thought that he would play. He will not. And Chris, you're the one who broke the news here live. So what does this mean for other players on Ohio today? Obviously, you're not starting Curtis Rourke now, but their number one wide receiver, Sam Wiggless, and their running back, Sia Bangura, is a guy that we like, quite frankly. So what does this mean for those two players?
I'm not super worried about it, to be honest, mostly because they're playing Long Island, I think they're the Sharks. Awesome mascot, by the way. But yeah, Willis was still really involved last week with CJ Harris under center, so I'm not pushing back too hard. And Sia Bangura should be, I think, fine given the matchup. The bigger issue is that this is a ACL issue. Like, he had a setback with his ACL, which he tore in November. It was quick to return to the field. Long term, this is probably a problem for Ohio. This is pretty sucky news. Got to be honest with you.
So I don't necessarily like to turn these discussions this way, but Ohio was kind of a trendy team to maybe push for the conference.
I got overs all over on Ohio.
If books will let you still play conference champions, especially for the MAC, I mean, are you shifting that one way or the other now?
Yeah, I mean, I have obviously hadn't had time to really dive into this.
Sure. We'll probably cover that this week on all our shows, and maybe we can talk about it on here next week. But just something to monitor, something to be aware of for everybody that's tuned in now. Let's make some game picks, guys. Nick, Chris, you're our betting guys here. Chris has got the crap model. Nick, I don't know what yours is, but I'm sure it's not called the crap model. What did the numbers spit out this week that we like for betting purposes? And Nick, by the way, your first week you went 6-1 against the spread. Is that correct?
Officially, yeah. So there are 3 CFB winning edge models. Our team strength model is kind of the official one. It wraps everything that we do into one model. So player ratings, injury updates, step chart, all that stuff. I have a talent edge model, which looks at only the talent numbers. We do recruiting ratings adjusted for experience and production, but it's just talent, not stats, not coaching history, none of that stuff that's in the team strength model. And then Prism, which is projected scoring margin, it works somewhat similarly to SP Plus, if you're familiar with that, but it is an only stats-based model. So it pulls out all the roster stuff, also all the coaching stuff, just looks at recent history. Actually, I guess coaching is in there a little bit, but anyway. So I look mostly, when I refer to our projections, it's the team strength model. And that one in particular shows some edges on a couple of games, a couple of underdogs that last I saw were 9.5. Maybe we have something updated on that, but Toledo plus 9.5 against Illinois. I know Illinois is getting some positive buzz recently, and understandably. I mean, last year the defense was legitimately one of the very best in the country, but they did lose NFL talent on both sides of the ball. And Toledo is the most talented MAC team, has, I think, one of the best G5 defenses in the country. Our projection is 3. Illinois favored by 3. In the team strength model, it's actually 3 also in the talent edge model. So that's a surprise. It's 8.8 in the stats only model, but still all 3 of those are under the 9.5. So I like that. And then ULM plus 9.5 against Army, similar. The team strength model has this much closer. It is Army favored by 3. Also, the talent edge model actually has ULM as an outright favorite of 4 points. So Army does a great job of neutralizing talent advantage most of the time. But this year, a little bit different because they are changing sort of their offensive philosophy, going away from the traditional triple option. I'm expecting personally maybe a little bit of growing pains in that transition. And I think ULM is a more talented team, should be able to take advantage of that and keep this one close, if not win outright.
All right, Chris, what do you like today?
I'm on ULM also. Gave that out to our members at 10.5 earlier this week. It's been dropping. I think ULM's a live dog there as well. I really like that call. All right. I talked about this team earlier. And we've been chatting about them all day. My favorite game on the slate. Taking Akron +10. I think they're also live dogs. I don't think Temple is 10 points better than this team. I think Akron's going to take a big step forward in year 2 of the Joe Moorhead era. They got DJ Irons under center. The offensive line is the big question. I think they're going to be a better unit this year. I think you got a little bit of experience coming back. They're learning a new system last year. I find it hard to make. I made this number 8.2. So it's a 2-point edge. I just think 10 is too many points. I think this game's going to be exciting. I think the over in this game is also interesting, but my play is Akron +10. This other one, which I hope it didn't move too much because I've seen
I see it at 12 on the 2 books that I usually am on now, Bet Rivers, and I believe on DK as well. They're at 12.
So this play is Western Kentucky to cover the 12. If that's the best number we can get. Against South Florida, I'll play it up to 13. If case your lines are moving, I'm not trusting South Florida year 1, especially week 1 of implementing this new system that Alex Golesh, who is a offensive coordinator at Tennessee last year, is implementing. Western Kentucky's just too good. I mean, they could put up like 55 points, 60 points. I just don't think South Florida. I mean, as bad as the Western Kentucky defense is, I just don't think South Florida can get there. This line should be 13-14, and it's finally catching some money this morning. But Western Kentucky, as long as it's 13, I mean it's money for me. I don't understand why it's so close, to be honest.
I think this game has the potential, which Chris and I talked about this on Twitter a little bit, to be last week's Army-Navy game. That basically doubles what the spread was. There's a very decent potential of that happening, in my opinion.
I'm just fading implementing new systems a lot. Like that's the same thing. That's the same reason why I'm on ULM that Nick gave earlier, which is like Army's transitioning from the triple option. Like, Navy was doing the exact same thing. Well, allegedly, they didn't really look any different. So yeah, I think there's a lot of value on some of these where they're projecting, oh, it's going to be so different. Year 1 usually is not that different. We saw it a lot last year.
All right, let's get into the game selections. Usually most weeks we do 5 games. That's what we have here this week with the full slate. All these lines are coming from DK, and they're about as fresh as within the past 24 hours when we had to submit everything. So I think these lines are probably still all in the same spot. Colorado at number 17 TCU. We talked a little bit about this game earlier. I see a TCU 20.5 point favorites. Before we talk about that, I think producer Will's got a bet on this game. Is that what breaking news?
Yeah. So let's go with another first quarter bet for you guys. We hit the Navy under half a point last week. So I think we're going to get a high scoring game from TCU Colorado today. Total 63.5. But instead of worrying about garbage time, let's go with the over 13.5 in the first quarter.
Oh, I like that. I'm about to go play that. Thank you, Will. All right, you guys carry the show here. I'm gonna make a bet here. Colorado TCU. Who do we like? Nick, kick us off. We'll go around in a circle here.
So I'm the projections, not necessarily me, are on Colorado. Projected point spread of 15. Talent edge closer to 4. But the stats only model likes TCU. But I will lean Colorado to keep it within 3 scores.
Alfred?
I don't like going against Nick, but my narrative is TCU. I mean, I just think Colorado is going to be a mess. A lot of the pre-camp hype and buzz has been very fluff, a lot of gimmicky type stuff that Prime's doing. I don't know if he's like actually coaching football or just trying to build buzz. I think Colorado is going to look like a mess, at least early, and maybe things get cooking later. But this TCU team's good. Chandler Morris is a veteran quarterback. I know they're going from Duggan to Morris, but like Morris is capable. I don't like Colorado. I think they could do something early, but by the end of the game, I think TCU pulls away.
All right, and I am taking TCU as well. Boise State at number 10, Washington. Washington is a 14-point favorite in this one. Oh, Chris, did you not go? Sorry, Chris. Sorry, Chris.
I'm also on TCU.
All right, Boise State at Washington now. Chris, why don't you start us this time so I don't forget you?
I got Washington, but I don't feel that confident. It's probably my least confident number out there. I project it closer to like 13.5, but I think Boise State can play.
Alfred?
Give me the Broncos, 2 touchdowns. I like it.
Nick?
Projections are kind of all over the place, really close, but have Boise State covering by just a little bit.
This was the toughest pick of the lot for me for this week, for the record. But yeah, I have Washington. I think maybe a push is in the cards here. UTSA, 1.5-point favorites at Houston, which I find very interesting, and it scares me a little bit because of how uneven UTSA's offseason was. Nick, who do you like here?
Team strength projection is UTSA by 1.55. So UTSA technically.
Best kind of technicality. Yeah. All right. Alfred?
It seems like, don't bet this game. Everything's exactly on that number. You're just going to probably get a lucky bounce one way or the other. I did pick UTSA, just basically siding with Nick. I don't know. I like Houston. I'm interested in Houston. This is a very good game. This is a very interesting game from a lot of angles, actually, and projecting for the rest of the season. So keep an eye on it.
I am a very unconfident UTSA backer. This actually opened up as UTSA as a dog, so I have them plus 2.5, but that's a 4-point swing since open.
I'm going to change my answer live on air here. I just changed it on the sheet. I think Houston wins this game. I just think UTSA has so much stuff going on with everybody being injured or potentially suspended or whatever else. Houston has not. They lost Clayton Tune, and Tank Dell. But I think if Donovan Smith can be 70% of what Clayton Tune was this week, I think they have a pretty good chance of winning this game. Quite frankly, where I think we're at. North Carolina, 2.5 favorites versus South Carolina. Chris, this answer shocks me.
People say I'm a homer, but I'm like, I hate my team. I think North Carolina is going to win this game. I'm picking them because they have the better quarterback in this matchup. I'm pretty concerned about South Carolina's. I just don't know what this offense is going to look like. I think it's going to be better than last year's, but I mean, Dow Loggins, we really don't know. And hasn't really been super positive, the buzz. I mean, the players like it, but media and analysts speaking. I just have a hard time picking South Carolina in this matchup. I've seen this game every year for the last decade, and I just never feel good about playing UNC, and I'm just going to stick with the quarterback. Games at a neutral territory. It's in Charlotte, so I expect about 50-50 crowd.
Alfred?
I'm kind of going South Carolina here. I'm a little nervous about it, but I think they just kind of like play some bully ball and maybe smack UNC in the mouth a little bit and get away with kind of a scratch and claw victory and really set themselves on a very buzzworthy campaign here.
Nick?
I'm on North Carolina. The quarterback is a real big part of it, but even making adjustments for Des Walker being out, the talent model and the official model both have North Carolina by 5.
Man, this is vibes versus models here because I'm taking South Carolina too, and that doesn't make me feel very good. But with how South Carolina ended last season, they bring back a decent chunk of the important pieces of that, at least offensively. I don't know. I think I'm going to take South Carolina in this one.
I made the game 3.7 for North Carolina.
3.7. Okay, so interesting there. The last one, the big game of the week, which we didn't really talk about that much, LSU Florida State, Sunday 7:30. Going to be an interesting one there. LSU is currently a 2-point favorite. What do we like here? Nick, go ahead. You're the lone FSU guy, I think.
Well, so again, leaning very heavily on the numbers. I try to get my opinion out of the way most of the time. I can't be trusted. So the projection here is almost an even 50-50. LSU favored by 0.11 in the official model. FSU actually has a talent edge of 1.5 points in my projections. In the Prism, model is also under 1. So I think this is a game that Florida State can and maybe will win outright.
Alfred?
I think LSU, I think the pressure on FSU is a little much to start saying that they're going to live up to it. I think LSU has been in this kind of spot more recently and
Chris?
will handle it.
I'm an LSU. I make it 2.1.
I got LSU as well. All right. Thank you guys for jumping in here with us. Week 1 in the books. We'll see you next week. We'll see what we got right, see what we got wrong. Enjoy the games today, guys.